Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of the Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Southwest Virginia fishing report with Matt Reilly. How you doing, Matt?
Doing good, Marvin. How are you?
As always, just trying to stay out of trouble, and we were talking before we started recording. You've got a bit of a weather mess in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, things been pretty dynamic, honestly, the last couple of weeks, but we're getting a cold front. I guess tonight's Tuesday night when we're recording this, and it's going to blow in tonight. We're going to have freezing temperatures and going to be in the 30s into the morning, and then really for the next week to 10 days, we're going to have lows around the upper 20s and 30s. So it's we're getting, every year we get this little kind of early spring tease where we get some really solidly warm weather and good smallmouth fishing, and then we kind of get our faces kicked in by winter again. So that's what we're looking at for the next 10 days or so.
Yeah, let's just talk about too whether or not we're going to have apples from Virginia. So
yeah.
So,
That's a little ways off.
Yeah, but they're going to start complaining. It's like down here in the Carolinas, start talking about the peach crop when you get that like late frost. But it's interesting because it is going to be raw, right? Because I saw highs like in the low to mid 40s, and you put a little wind on that. That's going to make for a pretty nasty day on the water.
Yep. So that is to say we've had quite a bit of high water here lately with a few inches of rain, and that's had our muskie fishing kind of sidelined a little bit. The rivers are still, pretty much across the board. The New River and the mountain streams are full to high at the moment and dropping and clearing. Mountain streams are definitely fishable, but and the New is fishable too. It's a little on the high side, and particularly the upper New is going to be a little dirty, and the lower New, just being subject to the dam in Radford, is going to be bouncing around a bit. So just because you see 6,000 cubic feet at Radford tonight doesn't mean it might not be 7,500 tomorrow morning. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. They're calling for a little bit more rain later this week, and nothing significant, it doesn't look like, and then potentially some snow next week. So again, not that it's spring, but kind of typical late winter spring in Virginia.
Yeah, which also gets us, we're kind of at that bubble, right? We were talking about water temperatures. I mean, we're getting kind of to the end of the road on the muskie thing, and that also means, you either have been or you're getting ready to kind of really gear up for pre-spawn smallmouth.
Yeah, so we have been doing some smallmouth fishing when we've had some windows to do so. And then, the muskie thing, lots of people like to talk like muskies start spawning the 1st of April, and that's maybe a good ballpark, but a lot of times it seems like it's a little more mid-March, at least in my neck of the woods when we hit, and it just depends on the year, but mid-March or so, and when we hit 50 degrees consistently. This cold weather that we're getting this week might, we'll probably certainly drop our water temperatures if they're right in the mid to upper 40s at the moment, potentially touching 50 depending on where you are. But we're going to definitely cool down a little bit here in the next few days, and so we'll get a little bit of life left in the muskie season, but it is not long for this world.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. I got a question for you from Brenner, since we're kind of slightly shifting gears towards smallmouth, and he wanted to get your thoughts on kind of when and how to fish a popper dropper rig for smallmouth.
Yeah, that's a good question. I am probably not the best person to ask. I've messed with it a little bit, but mostly wrote it off because I felt it kind of worked against me to a certain degree. When a lot of times when I'm fishing topwater flies for smallmouth, particularly bug fishing, I'm hunting for larger fish, and that in my mind, that dropper on that rig is kind of a it's definitely born of the trout mindset, but it's in my mind a little bit of a I don't know, kind of a stab at trying to get a fish that doesn't want to take your topwater offering. And um, if I'm doing a lot of sight fishing or targeting larger fish that I know to be hanging out in certain areas, I want them to be focused on my bug. And I think if you have 18 inches of tippet hanging off of your bend to your hook and some kind of minnow pattern or damselfly nymph or something like that hanging down below it, it's a little bit of a distraction and potentially spooking some fish, just because a lot of times when they react to that bug, they're going to come under and slowly move over your bug and sit underneath of it and inspect it. And I don't want any junk kind of hanging down in their face. So not something that I mess with a bunch. Obviously I'd never discourage anybody from messing around with different rigs and stuff, but that's kind of my take on it. I don't really feel like I have much of a need for it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've certainly seen trout back off when they, that little mono brushes across their back and they're done, right? It's over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not, and thinking, and that's, I guess I'm having a hard time putting it into words, but the reason why it kind of feels like a last ditch effort, like I'm going to put this dropper on because I'm not positive it's going to take my topwater bug. And when I'm topwater fishing in the summertime, my perception or my aim is that we're targeting the largest, heaviest fish in the river this way because they have a lot of body weight to maintain in some really warm water, and they need to expend as little energy as possible. So this bug that splats down on the surface, which, that splat I'm a huge fan of, because smallmouth bass, just like any sunfish species, is kind of programmed to react to anything that splats down in the water near them. They're going to react to it. They're going to go check it out or at least eyeball it. And if they're under the impression that it's a fairly helpless terrestrial insect that's stuck in the surface film, they should eat it because that's their best case scenario in the summertime. So that dropper just doesn't really fit into my playbook, really.
Yeah, I would imagine too, if you were fishing a bait fish under a popper, you're really not getting that action on the bait fish that's going to trigger a strike, right? I mean, it's kind of like,
right.
Yeah. I mean,
certainly not a bug. You could again, potentially, actually use a popper, which I guess may be the actual question here. Use a popper that you're going to animate and move across the surface with something underneath, which is an entirely different ball game. In my mind, that's kind of, in my mind, fishing a popper on the surface is basically fishing a streamer, because you're imitating a food source that's either swimming or kicking or doing something like that on the surface. So if you have a dropper behind that, potentially that's, a little, cluster of bait fish or, take your pick, a little bit different.
yeah, well, it's like running a spread for stripers or billfish, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email them to us. You can DM us on social media. And if we use your question, I will send you some articulate fly swag and we'll enter you in a drawing for some cool stuff from Matt at the end of the season. And Matt, before I let you go, I saw your newsletter. I know you've got dates that are kind of a little bit later in the season, but you want to let folks kind of know what you have available and how to catch up with you and get on your guidebook.
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. There's kind of a smattering of dates, 20 or so between the end of March and the end of September or so. And then we're, started to book a couple of muskie dates for this coming fall, but not really putting too much pressure on that at the moment. Just looking to make sure anybody that wants to get out smallmouth fishing gets a date where they'd like to get it. But at this point, August is totally booked. June's pretty much booked. April's pretty much booked. March is pretty much booked. So there's a smattering here and there, but always feel free to reach out. All my information's on my website, which is mattreillyflyfishing.com. And while you're there, if you want to sign up for that newsletter, that's where any kind of last minute cancellations are going to go first. So definitely check that out too.
Yeah, there you go. And folks, you owe it to yourself, even though it's going to cool off a little bit for the next week or so. Get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Matt.
Thanks, Marvin.